Hello and welcome today to the Christian Construction Podcast. We hope you'll stay tuned. We're going to be discussing the subject of video games. All right, welcome to the podcast today. We appreciate you tuning in here every Friday faithfully. At noon here on the Christian Construction Podcast, wherever you're listening to us, whether it's on Facebook or YouTube or iTunes or Spotify or all that other stuff. Google Play, yeah, there's a bunch of it, right?
There's a bunch of it.
Yeah. Get your cassette players out. No, don't. That don't really work. Brother Matt, how you doing?
Doing good.
Married life treating you well?
Yeah.
Here in
2 weeks.
2 weeks, amen. Praise the Lord. All right. You ain't sitting on the roof yet. That's good. That's good.
She ain't got that loud yet.
Brother Keith, how you doing?
I'm doing well. I'm not Gabe Carson.
No,
I'm
you're
doing
not.
well. I'm
No,
doing
no.
well. I'm happy to be here.
And as we are apt to say, you're half the man that Gabe is. You know that, right? Literally. You're
I didn't say it.
the
Brother
man.
Gabe, I didn't say it.
Matt's not laughing because he got tired of that joke every time he got missing. We said that about Keith. So, you know what? The good thing is you're like a third of the man that I am after all of this, right?
I didn't say that either.
Well, don't look. Just because Gabe is married to the pastor's daughter, don't mean you have to be scared of her. Okay, I'll get her in chat. She don't watch us anyway, so I'm not worried. She's not gonna say. And Gabe, he's not gonna say nothing
Why
about
y'all
it.
always give me a hard time about talking about Gabe being married to the
No,
daughter?
I'm nailing
and
it
you're
today.
afraid to say it.
I am nailing it today. So, we do appreciate you tuning in, and at whatever platform, whatever avenue you're walking down to come to us and listen to us, we do appreciate it. We're very thankful that folks would even listen. We don't claim to have the answers. We don't try to just tackle controversial subjects. We have questions asked to us, and if you would like to ask us a question, send a message. Brother Matt controls everything on the social media side of it. You can, call him, text him, send a message through Facebook or Instagram or.
Get his permission first.
You got to get, we just have to make sure it's all right with Hannah before we talk about it. So we have these different subjects, topics, and again, we don't try to be controversial, but we have questions asked to us. And one of the topics we've been asked to discuss is the topic of video games, and we're going to get into that here in just a moment. Right before we do, we want to thank our pastor, Barry Fieldbeck, and the Love Valley Baptist Church. This is a ministry out of the church. And then we want to thank our friends over at the Higher Grounds podcast. Hope that you're tuned into them. Every Monday, they air new episodes and then morning minute meditations throughout the week that I'm sure are a blessing to you if you watch those. And then we also have several folks that have helped us. Miss Jana Wisher at Verity Designs, and then local church Bible publishers out of Lansing, Michigan. And so we appreciate all of the help, all the folks that have been a blessing to us, giving us some encouragement, and then helping us by giving us some things to be able to give away here on the podcast as time has went by. So today we're talking about video games. Now, there are different philosophies, different thoughts about it. I will share mine personally. Brother Keith and Brother Matt are going to do the same. And we've done obviously we have some research and some numbers and some facts to give you. We don't want to just come and give you opinions and give you what we think, although sometimes that can be helpful to some degree. But we want to first of all see what the Bible says, and then we want to see what is the fruit that it produces. Two good ways to tell about the direction of something or whether or not it's beneficial is, first of all, what the Bible says. Secondly, the fruit it produces. Yeah. Are there seeds, as Brother S.M. Davis would say, are there seeds of preservation or are there seeds of disintegration? Yeah. And rooted in every godly philosophy are seeds of preservation, and in every worldly philosophy are seeds of disintegration. And so that's what we want to do today. We want to see what kind of fruit it's producing, what does the Bible say about it, and then we'll give you some of our personal thoughts on it. And so we want to start in the book of 2 Corinthians. Paul is writing to the church at Corinth with this second letter, and he's given them an account or giving them a charge rather concerning being careful because Satan's trying to get them. And of course, we could say a lot about the church at Corinth, but he gives them one verse in particular that I think would be it will be timely for this subject, and that is in 2 Corinthians chapter 2, verse 11. Paul is giving them all of this. He's saying all of this, and then he gives them the reason why. You know, a lot of times we question, why does the preacher preach this? Why does my Sunday school teacher teach on this? Or why does my mom and dad say? Or why does, whoever, name it, whoever it is in authority in your life, why do they? Well, sometimes the reason is in 2 Corinthians 2:11. Lest Satan should get an advantage of us, for we are not ignorant of his devices. And so the devil, in case you hadn't, if you've been saved very long, and even if you're watching this and you're not saved, you would be foolish to not realize that the devil has devices.
Right.
As a lost person, I knew that the devil had devices and tools and instruments that he was wanting to use to get my attention away from God, or to steer me away from the Lord, or to cause me to do something that would hurt myself. And so Paul's writing to the church at Corinth, and he says, all these things I'm telling you so that Satan won't get an advantage of you, so that we won't be ignorant of his devices. And so today it could be said that a lot of what we're going to say today is to try to make you aware of Satan's devices. Now, are we saying that video games are completely wrong? I'm not going to go out on a limb and say that. I will tell you personally, I don't have them in my house, and I have good reason for that, and I'll give that later on. But I do firmly believe that video games, if they are a part of your life, should be a very small part of your life. And we're going to give some reasons for all of that as we go throughout the podcast. And so, Brother Keith, why don't you start us off, and you're going to read out, I believe, Proverbs chapter number 6, and Brother Keith's going to give us some things to watch out for. What is it that video games and being hooked on video games, a video game problem, what is it that it would really promote?
Well, first, Proverbs chapter 6 and verse number 6, the Bible says, Go to the ant, thou sluggard, consider her ways and be wise, which having no guide, overseer, or ruler, provideth her meat in the summer, and gathereth her food in the harvest. How long wilt thou sleep? O sluggard, when wilt thou arise out of thy sleep? Yet a little sleep, a little slumber, a little folding of the hands to sleep. That is an analogy that it's directly. It says it relates to an ant.
Sure.
And the ant is wise enough to gather its food to stay active. There's a time coming when what this ant is doing is going to be crucial to their living. Some things that I've got wrote down. Brother Michael already said this, but it is I believe that it could be a device. The devil uses it as a device for deception. It is a way that we can view the world in a different light. It is, we can make this world in our video games whatever we want it to be. So it is a device of deception. It is a device of defilement. There are games out there that are introducing now kids to things that you would only see if you're looking for those things. It's becoming more prevalent. Now you're finding them in video games. So it's a device of deception, a device of defilement, and because it affects our desires.
Yeah.
I get this out of my video game. Why can't I get this out of the real world? My reality, and overall, it's a device of disobedience.
Yeah,
it's a device of disobedience, and overall, it is just a distraction. I wrote this down. Forgive me, I didn't come up with the D word for it, but also I think about the money, just the money that's spent over in the area, or just spending money in the video games. And the dollars.
But that ain't golden nuggets.
We're to be, the Bible talks about being a good steward.
Sure.
A good steward, and I believe that is true about our money. So if would Jesus go to GameStop, to Walmart, to Best Buy, and buy buy a game system? Would he buy video games? I don't know. It's you answer that question for yourself.
Put that
in
on
turn,
the WWJD
that's
bracelet.
that's
right?
going to be our coffee cup.
Put that on the bracelet.
So overall,
What would Jesus do?
The preacher last night.
GH.
G. He
tight.
emphasized that G.
Yeah.
And in turn, the video games, it deprives us of our sleep.
Sure.
It's necessary. Sleep is necessary. It numbs the mind. It promotes alternative realities. Promotes unrealistic goals. All those things that we've talked about already, and then false accomplishments. I'm getting this out of my video game.
Yeah,
Why
yeah.
can't I get this out of the real world?
Well, you said it right. Why am I not getting in real life what I'm getting out of this video game? And the more you do that, that's what
Fantasy.
you want to do, that fantasy. And we kind of hit on that on the social media side last week. Brother Matt, what you got there?
Well, video games growing up for myself, I'd say my generation, Brother Keith's generation, is when it really hit mainstream.
Yeah.
Video games, I guess, if you're a history buff and all that, been around since the Atari but it was kind of at the time, that was Brother Michael's heyday. He dominated the arcades.
Guilty.
But, at that time.
He had two sticks and a ball. Bloop,
Yeah.
bloop. And
What was it,
what were we
Pong?
at? Pong, man, yeah. And
But,
now look what we have. Yeah.
Right. So, but from what I've heard, I guess you could speak on it better than me. But from what I've heard, it was more just a family thing. You might play for 20 or 30 minutes.
Absolutely.
I remember my mom and dad when they got married. They got a Nintendo Entertainment System at a bridal shower. They said they instead of watching a movie, they would play Mario for hours. And but it's become now so much more than that. It's literally become all the social activity that
Sure.
many young men, young women have.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They'll go to school instead of talking about, let's meet up and play basketball afterwards. It's what time you going to be online this evening,
Yeah.
to play. So I got a couple of things that, I would say I'm not against video games, and I'm against some video games. There was one there's games when I was growing up that, to be honest, I would have been as scared to get caught playing that as I would have been just as scared if my dad would have walked into me playing that as I would have for
Right.
pornography or drinking or anything
Sneaking
else.
into the movie
because
theater.
Yeah, I mean it was. You talking about Grand Theft Auto and they had a game Diablo back probably the mid 2000s.
Yeah.
It was a trip through hell. So I'm not necessarily against games, but I am against certain games. But there are some questions that I've wrote down here with some Bible to back them up. My first question when it comes to the video game, and you're asking yourself, is this something that I should be a part of? Is this something that I should be doing? Well, a question that I would ask, number one, is will the video game edify me in some way? 1 Corinthians chapter number 10, verse number 23, popular verse. All things are lawful for me, but all things are not expedient.
Right.
That
absolutely.
word expedient simply means helpful.
Yeah.
Paul here, he's talking, he says, I can do anything.
Yeah.
We've heard pastors say it how many times? I can drink as much as I want to. I can take as many drugs as I want to. I can do whatever I want to. I just don't want to.
Yeah.
All right? But sometimes it may not be that it's, this great sin. It might just be that, it's not helping you in your life at all.
That's exactly right.
So is anything by playing this game, is it helping you in any way? Is it edifying your life? Is it what the word edify ties to building up?
Right.
Is it building your life up in any way? I would answer that. I would also ask myself this: what are my eyes taking in? Psalm chapter 101, verse number 3. You find yourself there in Psalm 101, verse number 3. The Bible talks about what's brought in. Let me get this text right. I should have tabbed
I will
myself
set
here.
no wicked thing before my
Yeah,
eyes.
I will set no wicked thing before my eye.
I hate the work of them that
So
turn
question
aside.
number one, will the video game edify me in some way? But what are my eyes taking in? What are you seeing on that video game? I recall uh, I recall, the first time, and just getting very, very personal with myself. The first time I was probably 14 or 15 years old, and I was playing a Call of Duty game. And that was the first time that I seen a fully unclothed woman was on a Call of Duty video game.
Wow.
It wasn't on, the TV. It wasn't on, and that's just very personal with me. And I'm willing to be open about that.
Yeah.
But that was a point in time in my life where that sin, something wicked, come into my eye gate simply from playing that video game. Was I looking for that? No, I had no plan to see that. I wasn't trying to see that. I didn't want to see that. But I wanted to play that game.
Yeah.
I wanted to see what was next.
Yeah.
It come in a tutorial that I know Keith's played. If you play those types of games, it'll get to a point where it'll just play a movie for a little while. But you want to see what's going to happen so you don't get lost. And you watch through that and things pop up. And, just a story from my own perspective. Another question, does it hinder good works? I find myself thinking here in 1 Corinthians chapter number 15 and verse number 58. Of course, Paul, here talking to the church at Corinth, he says, verse number 58, "Therefore, my beloved brethren, be ye steadfast, unmovable, always abounding in the work of the Lord, for as much as ye know that your labor is not in vain in the Lord." So 3 questions. Will the video game edify me in some way? What are the eyes taking in? Does it hinder good works? What good is your life accomplishing in the time that you're sitting there playing that game?
Right.
You may not be accomplishing nothing bad. You may not be doing anything bad. But what are you doing good?
Sure.
What are
Right.
you
Yeah,
benefiting
that's right.
your own life? What are you benefiting in the life of others? Something else I would ask is, is evil present and obvious? I mean, if you look, what is it, First Thessalonian talks about avoid all appearance of evils,
Abstain from all appearance of evil.
5:22.
5:22.
Is evil present and obvious? Well, I know plenty of games that I've played,
Yeah.
and I know plenty of games that are available that I haven't played. You can look at the title of some. We talked about that, Diablo. We talked about Grand Theft Auto. It shouldn't become as no surprise to you if you play those games that there's going to be evil present and obvious. Something that I would ask myself at the end of that is, or the last question, and I know my own self is, I recall Paul in Ephesians talking about be not drunk with wine wherein is excess, but be filled with the Spirit. Well, yeah, he was talking about real wine, but I think there's probably another side of that is, don't be controlled by the things of the world.
Sure.
But be controlled by the Spirit.
That's
Don't
right.
let something else control your life. So, will the video game edify me in some way? What are my eyes taking in? Does it hinder good works? Is evil present and obvious? But also, are you under the influence? Is there something that is controlling your life more than the Spirit of God is controlling your life? And if that's the case, you're in trouble.
Yeah.
You got to make a change.
Absolutely. So, guys, that leads me to a question I want to ask you. Matt's going to give us some interesting information here in just a few minutes about the different ages of the video games. But do y'all ever remember a time in your culture, your generation, where video games were not a part, even if you didn't have them and wasn't playing them at the time? Do you ever remember a time in your life when it wasn't a part of really your culture, your people? I mean, that's really been a part of your generation. Right?
Yes.
So let me go let me jump in the DeLorean and go back in the time machine, right? And go back to the late 80s, not the 1880s, the 1980s, so don't go back too far.
Don't make the World Series bets.
So this was when the Braves were still really bad, all right? So anyway, I remember a time, not when the Nintendo first got to America, and you have to remember, everything that come to us, especially in those days, it didn't, it would be a big thing.
Everything that come to Kaiser was 5 years late.
It was about, honestly, I feel like civilization, we were like 20 years behind everybody. But only about 5 years behind when it came to video games. So really, you didn't see people in our area, that didn't really catch on and become a thing till, I guess, probably 87, 88, 89. So I'm 5, 6 years old. And I remember us getting our first video game system. And so I'm saying this because my generation, when we go back, we have a point of reference where we can go back to life before video games. And even then, to give you an idea, whereas people sit on the video games now for, hours and even days at a time, to give you an idea of what my life was like, when we did get video games, we would play, and you had this big block adapter. Do y'all remember any of the game systems that had that big block adapter, and you plug it into the wall, but it looked like it was going to fall out, so you had to kind of put something up against it to make sure it's going to hold in there? That block adapter, see, just proved my point, right? So this big block adapter, that thing, if you played about 30 minutes, that thing would get hot. I mean, you could get a first-degree burn on that booger. I mean, it was that big old adapter would get
Brother
hot,
Michael
man.
was cooking eggs on
Son,
that
I'm telling you, you could iron clothes with that thing. It was heavy too. So that thing would get hot, and Mom would say,
before we went to church.
that thing get hot. Mom would say, all right, it's time to cut it off. And honestly, we could only play, and this is me, and at that time, it was before my baby brother and sister come along. It was me and my brother and two sisters. We would only get to play like 30 minutes at a time, And I was the youngest of those four, so I'm at the bottom of the totem pole. I get nothing, They wear out all the time.
Rise was getting nothing.
Getting rise was nothing, about like the way I didn't get biscuits, because they always got the seconds before I did. So that was my generation. So what would we do? We would go, well, I guess we're going to go back outside and play. We'd go outside and play and forget about video games.
Yeah.
We was too busy playing ball. We was too busy making trails in the woods. We was too busy playing with the dog. I mean, outside. There was things to do outside. And so for people my age, sometimes, especially with kids, you have teenagers or kids that are fixing to be teenagers, and you forget your kids, all they know is a life with video games. Whereas if you're anywhere from that 33 to 40 range, you have a point of reference, a frame of reference where you can say, well, it can't be that bad because I grew up with video games. But you have to remember, we had life before video games. And so sometimes I think we can get lost in that, and we don't realize just how much these things begin to consume our children's lives and those that are in the generations below us. And we might mark it off as, well, it's not a big deal. It is a big deal. We forget, or we don't put ourselves in the right frame of mind to realize that it can be detrimental. Brother Matt, all of that being said, I was shocked, absolutely shocked, at the age range. So Brother Matt's got a article or a graph giving us kind of a breakdown of the ages and the popularity. So why don't you give that to us?
Yeah, so this is, go ahead and give a reference here. This is found on Statista.com, and this article was published by Christina Go on September the 18th, 2019, so very recently. It's an age breakdown of video game players in the United States. Just start with the youngest. That didn't really surprise me too much. I figured so we got four different groups. We got under 18, we got 18 to 35, we have 36 to 49, and we have 50 and older. I figured it would probably be an 80% plus dominant below 18 to 35.
Sure.
Those two combined, I figured, I would have guessed would be the by far dominant age group. Turns out I was correct on the 18 to 35 side, which would be mine and Brother Keith's age group.
I'm 37. I'm not far out of that. So.
I mean,
You got me in. I'm not in it either, right?
So mine and Brother Keith's age group makes up 40%, 18 to 35 years old, of the video game players in the United States. The next highest was a tie, which blew me away, between those under 18 and those 50 years old and older, which I couldn't believe. 21% for both age groups to under 18 and 50 and older. And then 36 to 49, Brother Michael's age group, comes in last at 18%. So, yeah,
That's pretty mind-blowing,
pretty shocking.
That's crazy, man.
Yeah, so some other statistics that really caught me is, I kind of figured there would be a big gender difference.
Sure.
But as of 2019, now it's grew a lot. It shows in 2008 that it was about a 28 to 72 split for men, by far the most. but it is now up to 47-53. The women are getting close to overtaking the men.
Wow.
So it's about a 47-53% split. One, I guess, sobering statistic here, and it's sad to me because I know when I was growing up, I had some friends that, weren't necessarily, they weren't bad kids or nothing like that, but it might be a ball buddy.
Yeah.
And Mom would let me go spend the evening with him,
Sure.
hang out with him or whatever. And a lot of the bad games that I ended up playing, I wasn't allowed to play them at Mom and Daddy's house. Funny story. I recall when I was probably
Rebecca
12
Panther hit the
12
pause
I
button.
was probably
Do
12
not.
No, she knows about this. She's the one that cut it off. I was probably, I'd have been younger than that. I don't know. Whenever The Incredibles come out, the movie, they come out with a video game on The Incredibles. But because it was rated teen, I was allowed to watch the movie, but I was not allowed to play the video game. Another funny Rebecca Panther story on video games was NFL Street come out, and Ricky Williams looked like a thug, she said on the front. It was rated E, but we still weren't allowed to play it because he looked like a thug on the front of the game. But kind of a sobering statistic, it says that only 15% of parents know at least 3 games that their child plays.
Wow.
So only 15% are very active in, being aware of what is being played on the system.
Talking about moms, a funny story. My mom's, she was actually only about 20 years behind this technology, or she was 20 years ahead of the technology. When we first got that Nintendo, the main game was the original Super Mario Brothers, And as we try to get her to play it, so she comes in there with an apron, biscuit dough between her fingers, She's trying to play Mario, and as she's running with him, to make him jump, she would raise the controller. She tried to do like that, and I thought, looking back, Mama was about 20 years ahead of everybody.
On the Wii, man.
Well, Mama, you would have had it. So, when I think about the video games, honestly, I used to hear preachers preach and make statements about it, and I think, they're just fuddy-duddy, they're out of the loop. I had a PlayStation console. You guys know that. Y'all had been over my house. We played. I deal with teenagers, work with teenagers. It's fun.
You didn't get rid of it until I started dominating.
Well,
2K.
that's really the main reason.
You
got me.
Until I come around.
Close this episode. So my boys were really young. They were coming up. I'm guessing Ethan couldn't have been. It's been 4 or 5 years since I got rid of it, I think. Ethan was probably like 6 or 7 years old, something like that.
Yeah.
So Ethan's 7, Mike at the time was 6, and I would hear preachers preach on that, and I would think, it's not really big. Why y'all preaching on that? It's just a thing. And I had teenagers coming over. It was fun. They'd come over. It wasn't nothing to do outside because it was raining or snowing or whatever, and cold as all get out. And you wouldn't want to go outside, and so we'd stay in there hemmed up and play video games, just have a good time. And talk junk to each other, and all that. Well, honestly, in my house, I didn't allow our kids to play it. I didn't. And my boys at 7 and 6 were really good. I mean, they were beating teenagers and stuff. That's scary. And, walking the walk and talking the talk make you mad because they would talk smack to you. And so they wasn't playing it, but maybe 30 minutes a day, and they would have to play it together. They couldn't play it, and it was just the baseball and the basketball and the football games, And I will never forget the day I come home. I got through working here at the church, come home, sit down, and it just dawned on me as I was coming in. My boys didn't want to talk about what they had done that day. They didn't want to talk about what they had done in school. They didn't want to talk about what they had played outside. Their first bit of conversation was, if you get on there and do this, and I thought about if you get on there and do that, and what if you created this player, and what if their whole world, even though they were only playing it 30 minutes a day, at 6 and 7 years old, their whole world was revolved around when Daddy gets home, we're gonna play it some, and that's all they were thinking about was playing that. And I remember that feeling of, oh man. They've got an addiction. They've got an addiction. Yep. And they were so young. And so from that point forward, I'm not against them. Now, I'm not going to tell you I'm for them either necessarily, but I'm not totally against them, but I know that in my house, there was just so much more that I wanted my boys to be learning during this time in their life. Let me give you just a few things that when I did after that, I began to do some studying and reading and researching. And this is some things I found. Video games, a couple things that and some of these are going to kind of go over the top of what Keith had said as well. But it promotes an escape from reality. There was a couple in South Korea a few years back. They let their baby die of starvation while feeding and nurturing and providing for a virtual family online. So their physical family's dying, but they're living their life for a virtual family that they cannot see, feel, touch, tangible, nothing, you know. And then it's not just an escape from reality, but it's literally a waste of time. 34 million gamers that spend an average of 22 hours a week. That's not all the gamers, but there are 34 million that profess or say that they spend 22 hours weekly. That's a part-time job.
Yeah.
I mean, really, it's a part-time.
Yeah.
They could be working, earning money, be living much better than they are. And then there's the drug-like effects of playing video games. It rewires the brain. 9 out of 10 children, that's approximately 64 million U.S. children, play video games. Excessive gaming, this is medically proven, excessive gaming before 21 or 22 can rewire the brain to the extent that the more they play, the more they want to play. A 13-year-old, just totally rewire them. A 13-year-old shot his mom because she took Call of Duty away from him. A 16-year-old killed his mother with a hammer after she took away his PlayStation. An 8-year-old hung himself after being scolded for playing too much. Now, there's a common denominator in all those. There's no dad present in the picture in any of these stories. And that's a big part of it, too. A video game cannot replace a father's presence in the life of a child. But then on top of that, where did they get this violent nature from? Where did they get that aggressiveness? Notice the games that they were playing, Call of Duty, games like that. There are those who have gamed themselves to death. I read of a story, a 22-year-old had a heart attack playing video games, 22. A 20-year-old died of a blood clot because of video games, sitting in one place too long, sitting still, and when they stood up, the clot began to move. They died. Just like that, from playing video games. 13-year-old girl had a heart attack playing video games. 13 years old. Is it 100% wrong? I can't tell you that it's 100% wrong. But I just know for my family and from all of this, I would say before you just open the doors and let everything in, monitor it. Keep an eye on it. What Brother Keith talked about, how that ant disciplines itself. You know, a child does not have within them the ability to discipline themselves in every area of their life. They just don't. I have seen some kids who tried really hard and were, for the most part, successful. But God designed for a child to have parents so that those parents would help discipline the child. Not the discipline like you're in trouble. Discipline like put walls up, walk this, do that. This is healthy, this is unhealthy. Eat your vegetables, stuff like that. And for the most part, we have children who have just been allowed to do whatever. If it feels good, do it. And it's affected a whole, not just a generation, but multiple generations now because nobody's saying anything. And my attitude before, I saw a lot of this was, it's not a big deal, until I saw it start to settle in on my own children. So, Brother Keith, anything to add?
You give a little bit of testimony of when I was coming up, we always had it in and around the house.
Sure.
But also when I was coming up, we spent a lot of time outside. We was cutting down trees with hammers just to watch them fall.
With hammers.
With hammers. Yes.
At my house.
Yeah. And so, we mentioned being a steward earlier. We give the Lord 10% because it belongs. The 10% belongs to Him.
Sure.
And we always talk about tithing like it's always a money thing. But what about our time? 10% of our time. You're awake. Somebody like me, I'm awake for about 18 hours a day. That's you know, a lot of time, if I give 10% of that to the Lord, you know, that's not enough time to be playing video games for
No,
sure.
that's right.
You know, and I said this before, I believe even on the podcast, we, by default, as a lost person, we just live our life to the fullest, living for the devil. You know, there's not enough time to make all this up, to live life to the fullest for the Lord playing video games. I just can't. It's like I said earlier, it is a distraction.
Yep. Brother Matt, anything else to add? I'm good. Well, we do thank you for tuning in, and we hope that you'll continue to watch. Please be sure to like, share, comment, subscribe, whatever you need to do there. You can listen to us on audio only on iTunes or on Google Play, Spotify. Excuse me. So be sure to check us out there, and you can watch us. Not that there's anything different to see. We might be in a different building from one week to the next. You can watch us, our episodes on Facebook and on YouTube every week. And so again, thank you for tuning in, and we hope you'll tune in next week here on the Christian Construction Podcast.